You know, it's already been 2 months since release, and I haven't seen an art breakdown video of this game yet, so I figured I may as well give it a go. Let's dive into the art of Respawn Entertainment's Apex Legends, and use what we learned to try and design our very own legend. My name is Mr. Mung, and this is Mr. Mung Draws. In concept art behind any media, there's usually a decent amount of variation in style, depending on the stage of production and the type of function that the art serves. It could be a highly detailed splash screen to illustrate a scene, or something more mechanical to showcase the design. To keep things somewhat uniform, what we'll be looking at specifically and what we'll be attempting to emulate a part of is the 2D character box art done by the talented Autumn Rain Turkle. The guy did the Justice League posters, check him out. The most defining features of this character art can be split into 3 main aspects. 1, a strong emphasis on line work following somewhat universal inking rules, where the larger, more dominant shapes have thicker line width. 2, a somewhat cel-shaded style, illustrated by abrupt value changes instead of a continuous smooth gradation. 3, a color scheme that focuses on relatively desaturated tones, with most colors not reaching past 50% saturation. The exception, of course, being the highlight color, which often serves to highlight a particular mechanic associated with that character. With Gibraltar, it highlights his shield, with Bangalore, her smoke grenades. Now, this is the first time I've tried designing for a specific IP, and it's also in a genre that I'm unfamiliar with, so to start off, I looked at some military reference to get a feel for the sort of equipment and clothing that might make sense in the setting. After that, I just got to drawing and eventually came up with 4 preliminary ideas. It's kind of difficult to assess how good a design is, especially if you haven't done it before, so I went off to the subreddit to let the internet decide, and I got some pretty useful feedback. And some not so useful feedback. As a result, I went back to the drawing board wanting to improve my pitch from the character art to the abilities. In pursuit of that, I refined the design brief into 3 objectives. Firstly, the obvious, it needs to fit the world space. We can't include elements that massively break lore or genre, so no like shape-shifting into a dragon. Secondly, it needs to be realistically implementable. By that I mean we can't introduce a new mechanic that would require lots of resources to make work, like a character that destroys cover or one that literally rides a titan. This feeds into the third point of no breaking the central design philosophy. Apex's characters appear to have deliberately low-key abilities versus something like Overwatch, because the game focuses more on core FPS skills. What decides a fight is usually out-aiming and out-positioning the opponent. And having half the hitbox volume, that tends to help. With that being said, we can now introduce Spawn. I knew I wanted to design a scout character since we currently only have Bloodhound. A scout in my mind would have lower hard offensive capabilities like airstrikes or gas, but would still be able to exude threat from their mobility and intel gathering. Giving the character mechanical legs allows me to create a more unconventional silhouette, while also solving the in-law problem of why they have enhanced movement. You can see that I have some scribbles of how I want the legs to look scattered here and there. I've always liked that animalistic 2-joint structure. After the initial lines are laid down, in order to achieve that clean line variation, I went over the larger forms with a fixed width pen. This is because on the box art, line variation is very segmented, meaning each line depicting a form will not vary in width along the length of the stroke. While on the subject of this though, when I saw that there was a new legend being released, everyone else was like, yeah, there's a new legend. I was more like, ah crap, he's got mechanical legs. No, a design overlap. After the lines are done, we can start blocking in the colors. The color scheme was centered around sandy, earthy tones to reflect the arid outlands that I envisioned Fawn to operate in. When we add in the darker shadowed regions, we move in value steps of roughly 10 to 20% increments. No smudge tools or blending here. If we want to imply a soft edge, we simply add a couple intersecting parallel lines. This is pretty similar to how a lot of comics depict the illusion of gradation. You can also achieve a similar effect by simply slapping on a posturization filter across stuff. While past me is painting away there, this gives me some time to talk about the abilities, since they link intrinsically with the design. But before I do, I need to stress that this is all about delivering a concept, a character pitch. We're not trying to create an already perfectly balanced, implementable character, so if some of the ideas are vague, they're supposed to be. And if you have any insights or ideas to contribute, do let me know in the comments below. Let's start with the passive. I didn't want to impose too much on existing design space, so instead of increased movement speed, we have increased jump height. You could use it to more effectively juke an enemy or shave off a few valuable seconds getting to the high ground. Fawn's active is literally equipping a pair of binoculars. They have threat vision and a great degree of variable magnification. You could use this to ping enemies through smoke or simply scout out an area from a vantage point. The ult is kind of a weird one. The idea is that you throw down a moving portable radar bot that moves forward, marking all enemies in its radius. Originally, this ability was going to be a moving suicide bot where you would mark the target location using your binoculars and it would just home in and explode. However, I felt that sounded a bit gimmicky and would take away from the gunplay focus. So now we are approaching the final stages of the design. What I did after the painting was a little level correcting to reduce the intensity of the blacks by about 5 or 10%, as well as adding in those blue highlights around the hood to break up the monotony of the olive tones. If I were to self-critique, I think I maybe achieved 60 to 70% of the look, but I screwed up in 2 key areas. The shape language I used for the mechanical legs doesn't really fit Apex since it's far too smooth and organic. The other area is more on initial planning. I fixated a bit too much on the line work versus shape and value distribution, hence why I had to jury rig a bright highlight color afterwards. This should have been designed into the character from the beginning at a thumbnail stage. There's also additional areas like weight distribution and posing that I should keep in mind for future projects. All in all, this has been a super valuable learning experience. And there you have it, designing an Apex Legend.
Ah, no! What the hell? This is some trippy shit.
Don't wanna be dick, but these trash.
I believe in it, go low! Ah, he's up there!
I don't know what I'm meant to be doing here.
It's okay, you can tag!
Where am I meant to go? Oh, I don't have any guns. There's even someone there.
Come on!